Hello, Commanders! Today, we're going to be doing a tier list ranking of the new LEGO collectible minifigures series, Dungeons & Dragons. I'm quite happy that LEGO has decided to include scannable QR codes on each box so you can tell which minifigure you are buying, making this series already pretty great for getting minifigures for Construct&Command, since you won't need to buy minifigures blind. All you need are a QR code scanning app and a list of each minifigure's QR codes, which you can find in the link in the description below. Alright, so for this ranking, we're actually going to be splitting up the rankings into units that are good for army building and minifigures that are good for kind of making leaders or heroes or bosses. And so there are going to be two different rankings for each minifigure. And we're actually going to start out with the Dwarf Barbarian, which I'm going to put into A tier for army building, and I'm also going to put in A tier for making a leader, hero, or boss. The Dwarf Barbarian comes with a lot of great pieces, including the super unique axe, which I think is just great. So very easily just build an army of dwarves with battle axes, or you can take that axe and actually all the pieces of the dwarf and turn it into a Viking if you're not as inclined to make a dwarf army. Of course, if you are making a dwarf army, this minifigure comes with two different heads, one a male figure, one a female figure, so you can actually get a lot of variety in your army, at least in the facial expressions, by just army building this minifigure. So that actually makes it a great minifigure for army building, and also for a hero or leader, I think it makes it pretty good as well. Now, my only complaint about this is just that dwarf armies are pretty specific. I wish that this minifigure came with a shield or a helmet, something that I consider a little bit more dwarf-like, but, you know, can't have everything. But instead of a torch, a shield. A shield would put this minifigure into S tier, but A tier, still pretty solid pick. All right, and so next up we have the Gith Warlock. And so Gith Warlock also going to put in A tier for army building, and we're going to put the Gith Warlock in S tier for hero or boss building. I think the Gith Warlock comes with a lot of great pieces, comes with 2 daggers, which is great because if you're equipping a unit with throwing daggers, these are also special daggers. We haven't seen this mold before, or at least I haven't. Daggers look super cool. I love the seeing eye staff, and so I think that that makes this a great leader building minifigure. Also, the printing on the Gith is just great as well. For army building, you know, you could make a Gith army, but of course, the printing is not quite army building material. It kind of seems more like a special unit. But that being said, with the daggers, with the armor that the Gith comes with, and also the fact that this again is one of those minifigures where you get a male and female head, you can actually just army build this if you so wish. It'll be a very fancy Gith army you'll be building, but I think this minifigure really lends itself to buying multiple copies to kind of remix the pieces at the very least, help outfit any army you're looking for. All right, next up we have the Tiefling Sorcerer. So Tiefling Sorcerer, we're actually going to put in B tier for army building, but of course we're going to put Tiefling Warrior in S tier for special unit building, because for army building, the Tiefling Sorcerer, pretty good. However, you really couldn't make a whole army out of these Tieflings. It's not like they come with armor or sword. They, of course, have the cool Sorcerer special effect and the baby dragon, and the minifigure itself just looks amazing, but I think it would be kind of hard to army build with this minifigure in particular. Maybe, of course, you could remix it with other torsos or weapons, but for army building, I'm going to put it B tier in terms of creating special units. This is just top tier. It looks incredible. Love the printing on this minifigure. Love the sorcery effect, and that baby dragon is just a chef's kiss, amazing piece. So Tiefling, definitely S tier for special unit building. Next up, we have the Dragonborn Paladin, which I'm just gonna throw immediately into S tier army building and immediately top of S tier for special unit building. I have almost nothing to complain about with this minifigure. This is just perfect. The armor is incredible. This armor can go in any army, and it just looks so good. You can make an army of these Dragonborn Paladins as is, and it will look super cool, or you can have this Paladin be the leader of an army, and that would also look super cool. You could take pretty much each component of this minifigure and separate it and put onto different minifigures, and they will all work. The shield, the armor, the legs and torso itself, the mace, they're just on their own, just incredible. You know, for all those reasons, love it for S tier for special unit building as well. You know, I'm gonna say my only complaint with this whole entire series is really just that there are no helmets. This is the only unit with a shield, and I like shields a lot. So I just wish there were more shields, but I'm so happy we get a tower shield with the Dragonborn Dragonborn Paladin. Also wish that the mace was not transparent, but again, I'm just being picky here. This is an amazing minifigure. It will be very hard to find because I think everyone is going to be going after it. After the Dragonborn Paladin, we have the Halfling Druid, which I'm actually going to put in C tier for army building, and I'm going to put in B tier for special unit building. You know, I think this minifigure is pretty cool. I like some of the individual components for army building or for making a special unit. The hood with the antlers in particular is just a really cool, special looking piece, and I think if you're making kind of a more foresty or pagan kind of army, I think it just will really augment how cool everything looks and feels. The torso itself, I think, could be remixed into kind of a forest man army building vibe, and the cape itself is also really cool. But again, I think this is just a very specific minifigure that is going to be hard to actually make an army out of these. You could take the parts and put them onto different units, but as it stands, you can't really army build, in my opinion, with this halfling druid. And also, I mean, you could make an army of halflings. There's nothing stopping you, and power to you if you do. I think that'd actually be kind of hilarious to just defeat your enemies with an army of halflings. As a special unit, I think this, you could have the druid as a standalone special unit. I think it would be cool. You could totally work it into a lot of Construct&Command matches, and maybe I think it actually lends itself more to kind of remixing it into other minifigures and kind of taking the parts. Again, the cape and the hood are just incredible. So I think you can make some really cool special minifigures with the Halfling Druid. And next up is the Aarakocra Ranger. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And so for this Ranger, I'm going to put it in A tier for army building, and then I'm going to put it in B tier for special unit building, but above the Halfling Druid. So I think this minifigure is great for army building. If you were into making a Aarakocra army, it'd be cool to have a medieval army where every unit has flight and can fly around the battlefield. I think that'd actually be a super cool match, a very interesting take. Of course, you'd have to make them a lot more expensive than just the normal medieval warrior, but you can army build these as they are. Of course, while I'm not putting it in S tiers, I think that it's just, again, a very specific army that if you're into it, I think it's great, but you really can't use many of these pieces to make any other kind of army. The legs are specifically bird legs. The head is specifically a bird head. It's not even a mask that fits over a unit head that it comes with. So very specific army building, but if you're into it, it's great for it. Kind of for those very reasons, not that great for special unit building. I think the bow's cool. I think the torso's cool. But again, unless you're going for a Aarakocra special unit, it's not that great. Next up, we have the Mindflayer. So Mindflayer, I'm going to put in A tier for army building, and I'm going to put it in B tier for special unit building. I personally love the Mindflayer, especially because it comes with an Intellect Devourer, which can actually fit on other minifigures' heads. So I think that's just great. I mean, you can really lend itself to army building. The Mindflayers, you get the Intellect Devourer, so you kind of have a whole Mindflayer package whenever you get this minifigure. So with a few of them, I think you make a really cool Mindflayer force. Of course, what's bringing it down here is, once again, this is a very specific army, and Mindflayers aren't known for having huge numbers. It's not like Mindflayers are legion. You kind of end up with a very specific kind of unit. You can buy a few of them and make them few in number, but they can really pack a punch as individual units, which is why maybe a little bit more inclined towards special unit creation. But at the same time, there aren't a lot of really unique pieces here or pieces that you can work into other minifigures. I think it's a really cool torso and robe or cloak bottom. Beyond making a kind of dark mage with normal minifigure head and hands, I think you're kind of just stuck with a Mindflayer here, which again is great, but not that great for special unit creation. All right, and next up we have Strahd von Zarovich, and I'm gonna put him actually as a B tier for army building above the Tiefling, and I'm gonna put him as A tier for special unit building above the Dwarf Barbarian. I think this is a super cool minifigure. I really love all the detail on the torso. The sword we've definitely seen before, but I consider a kind of higher class sword, and so I think that's great to see. And I actually do love this rat. The rat's a great piece, especially with the red eyes. I really enjoy that kind of evil looking rat. So why I put it in B tier is that I think that if you were to swap out the head and the hands and just replace them with any other minifigure, I think you could make a few nobles that could be worked into an army. I think especially with the sword, you do end up with what could kind of be like a nobleman, better equipped unit. And so I kind of like it for army building for that purpose. But again, you can't really get too many of them and work them into an army. But I think this would actually work quite well with a Lion Knight army, one or two of them. Also, you get the rats, which if you're looking to kind of make like a plague army or maybe have like a plague sorcerer, you could definitely do something something with the rats as like a summon ability or just a kind of minion. Love the rat. In terms of making a special unit, I mean, as is, you have a vampire, cool sword. Yeah, this is just already a great special unit on its own. I think it has great remix potential, but as is, great special unit, a lot of upward potential for mixing it with other pieces. Next up, we have the Elf Bard. Elf Bard is actually going to be our only D class of army building, but we're going to put it in C for special unit creation. The logic here is just that while I think this is a really well done minifigure, I love the loot. It's so beautiful. I really appreciate the fact that we get 2 different heads, so we can get a lot more variety with the character that we're creating. But you know, the gold cutlass, we've seen it before. It's not a unique piece to this minifigure. Because of that, and without any other accessories besides a loot, unless you want to make an army of bards, which may strike more fear in the hearts of your foes, especially if you sing during the match, I think it's going to be really hard to army build with any of these pieces. I think you really can't army build with any of these pieces. Maybe you can make some townsfolk, very fancy townfolk, but that's about it. And that's, you know, that same logic applies to special unit creation. You can work something out here. If you want a bard, that's great, but it's a very specific use case for making a special unit. All right, and then we have the Lady of Pain. So while I love this minifigure, we're gonna put Lady of Pain in C tier above the Halfling Druid for army building, and we're gonna put the Lady of Pain all the way up in S tier for special unit creation because, oh my gosh, this minifigure is great. The torso printing, cloak bottom printing, the mask itself, just so cool looking. It's amazing. I love this minifigure. Definitely a great boss or god or something, you know, you can have your army's face. It's incredible. So special unit creation, this is definitely S tier without a doubt. But for army creation, you can kind of really only have one. I mean, who am I to limit you? You can have as many as you want. But I think, gravitas of the unit gets diluted out the more that you would have on the field. So I think this works as kind of a one and done for an army. You know, definitely the head of an army, but I don't think you'd really have an army of them. All right, and so getting close to closing it out, we have Szass Tam, who I'm actually going to put up in A tier, in the middle of A tier for army building, and I'm going to put at the top of A tier in special unit creation. And so my logic here is that while this does seem like a very specific minifigure, I think this Lich is an amazing addition to any undead army that you're building for Construct and Command. I mean, it has the flame piece, it has the red skull. The red skull is great. So I think you end up with a lot of opportunities to kind of work this into a necromancer or undead army. And it's been a while since we've seen an undead sorcerer type that LEGO has put out. And so I think this is just perfect for it. So, you know, you can't probably make a whole army of these once again, but I think maybe adding, depending on the size of your undead army, 3 or, you know, more into an army would look really cool and would have, you know, really great like kind of magic abilities to back up your undead forces. In terms of special unit creation, I mean, it's a Lich. I don't know what more I need to say. It looks really cool. It's great. I could have a few more accessories. I think it's a really well done minifigure. I love that you can see the ribcage through the cloak. Great special unit creation. And finally, we have Tasha the Witch Queen, and we're gonna put her at the bottom of B tier, and we're gonna put her at the top of A tier. Rationale for that, you know, I think this is just a really well done minifigure. The leg printing is great. The arm printing is fantastic. We don't usually see that. And the torso printing is also quite well done. We get a spell book with a really cool cover and screaming mouth inside. So with all those things, I think that for army building, not a whole lot of potential. I think some remix potential. Again, since this torso and legs are so well done, I think you can kind of easily fold that into like a rogue or some other kind of sorcerer, or just kind of keep as is as a sorcerer in an army. But you definitely can't army build an army of witches. Again, who am I to tell you how to make your armies in Construct and Command? But it would look a little bit weird, and I think lose some of that gravitas. But for special unit creation, I think as is, obviously great, but I think also a lot of remix potential. You can take these pieces and make your own special units, or just kind of upgrade her in general. I think maybe with some spell effects or things you could do. And so that's it. So I think overall, I would rate this as a S tier LEGO collectible minifigure series for Construct and Command. I think it's rare that we get a series where there's maybe only one minifigure that doesn't quite fit into Construct and Command play. And that's just, the Elf Bard. But even then, I think it's a really cool minifigure, and I collected it anyways because I just really like how the minifigure looks. So this is definitely S tier collectible minifigure series for sure. If you disagree with any of these rankings or have your own take, comment below. Let us know what you think about this minifigure series, which ones you're collecting, and we hope to do more of these tier rankings in the future. Good luck out there, Commanders.